welcome to everybody, and thank you for coming. I know it's sort of late in the semester, and things are starting to get a little pressured, so very much appreciate your taking the time for this important event. I'm very pleased to introduce Stephanie Demarco, our View from the Top speaker today. She is, of course, as we said in the announcement, a very successful entrepreneur. Graduated from Cal in 1979 with a BS in Business Administration. Started Advent Software in 1983, along with Berkeley engineering alumnus Steve Strand, ECS graduate, 1979. And here we are, 13 years later, and with a couple ups and downs. 23. God, I'm out by 23. Jeez. Did the math wrong on that, didn't I? 23 years later. That's true. That's why we have your programs, right? Is that so? Advent is a very successful company, one of the leading developers of software solutions for the investment management industry, more than 4,500 clients in 50 countries, annual revenues of around 170 million. Stephanie's engineered the growth of the company from the startup to a NASDAQ-listed company with worldwide operations and 850 employees. Now, I first met her in 1995 when she was on her roadshow and came to an event held at the Mayfield Fund, the company that I used to work with. And here she was. She walked in, and I was so impressed. She was 7 months pregnant, and on a major 30-city roadshow for the IPO. And the result of that was that the company actually was one of the top IPOs that year in the Bay Area, according to Banking and Finance Quarterly. Stephanie lives in the Bay Area, a community leader as well as a business leader. The most important thing she does, I think, is serves on our College of Engineering Advisory Board, and we very much appreciate that. She's a trustee of the San Francisco Foundation, serves as chairman of their investment committee, formerly a trustee of UC Berkeley Foundation. She was named Business Leader of the Year by the Haas School of Business in 2000, received the Financial Woman of the Year Award in 2003 by the Financial Women's Association, was named one of the top 10 financial technology innovators of the decade by the Wall Street and Technology magazine. Today she's going to share her experiences with her about a very important topic, particularly as we move into this new century, this new decade here, halfway through it, in terms of how you start and successfully grow a long-term successful software company, a really important topic for us all. Stephanie, it's a great honor to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard, and it's a pleasure to be here. As Richard said, the subject of my talk is lessons on building a software company for the long term, and I put the emphasis on long term. Sometimes I feel like one of those characters in the Survivor TV show. I've been in this business for a very, very long time, and built Advent, started building Advent along with a colleague of mine who we both had the good fortune of attending this wonderful university. And we were both working in a very small investment management firm in the early 80s when we had the idea for starting Advent Software. And this was way back in the very, very early days of the PC industry, and back in 1983. And in those days, most personal computers didn't have a hard disk drive. They were floppy disk-based computers. And they actually didn't even look like the personal computers that we know today, particularly the portable computers. I remember being on an airplane, and I had one of those luggable computers from Compaq. We used to call them luggable because portable just didn't seem like the right term for those computers. And I was struggling with this thing, trying to get it into the overhead bin of the airplane. And this very nice man walked up to me and asked me if he could help me with my sewing machine. And that's actually what they looked like. They did look like a great big sewing machine. So fortunately today, nobody ever confuses our portable computers with sewing machines. But at the time, when we started the company, as I say, it was very, very early in the PC industry, and we really didn't have a clue that we were at the beginning of what was going to be a very important and very big trend. But we did have a hunch that the first little computer from IBM that did have a hard disk, and that was the IBM XT that was introduced in about 1980, late 82, early 83. We had a feeling that this was going to be a big hit. And again, it was not much more than a hunch. And we were both working in an investment management firm over in Marin County. And we were dealing with lots and lots of numbers and lots of math, not much higher math, but a lot of math. And it was clear to us that it would sure be a lot easier to put all these numbers that we were dealing with in a computer and get rid of all the paper and the typewriters that we were dealing with. So, so we had the idea to launch Advent. And we had the good fortune of having an angel investor. At the time, I called up the richest person I knew, and I often say he was the only rich person I knew. And he was someone that my husband used to play tennis with. And he, to our great shock, actually, wrote us a check for $90,000. And we thought that was an enormous sum of money until we realized that that really wasn't a lot of money to start a company on. But nonetheless, it was what gave us our start. And we set to work to write a portfolio management software program for investment managers to keep track of their customer portfolios. And amazingly enough, and one of the things I'm particularly proud of is today the company has a market capitalization of about $900 million. We have global operations. We have about 850 employees. We have 4,500 clients around the world. And the company was self-financed on that original $90,000. We built the company on $90,000. We did subsequently, years later, take some venture capital, but it really was in order for us to learn about institutional capital and what that meant and bring some different advisors into the company. We actually, at that point, were profitable and were self-funding and generating cash. So it wasn't as if we needed the capital. It was more of an exercise in maturing and growing as a company. So it's something that we're very proud of, is that we built it from a very, very, very small base. But it wasn't an overnight success by any stretch of the imagination. We, as I said, it was very, very early days in the PC industry, and we were trying to sell software to businesses that would run on this computer from IBM, the IBM XT. And unfortunately for us, most businesses didn't look at these nascent machines as very serious computers. They were effectively, to a lot of people, they were hobby machines and kind of tinker toys. And very often the reaction I would get when I would walk into a prospect meeting would be, who's the girl? Where are the grown-ups? And you think I'm going to run my business on that little computer? So there was not a lot of belief in the very, very early days that the PC really had the capacity to be a serious computer. And that's really where the first lesson that I want to share with you comes in. It turned out that this was absolutely the perfect time to start this business because we were so early. We were early in the market. We didn't have any competition. And so I often like to say that if a business opportunity that you're looking at looks like a good opportunity, it probably isn't. If people are writing about it and talking about it, I guarantee you it's probably too late. And somebody's already doing it if people are writing about it and talking about it. So if you have an idea about starting a company, you want to mine in areas where no one is mining. And I think it's duck hunters say that you want to aim before the duck, because if you aim at the duck, you're going to miss the duck. And I think it's the same in the software business. You have to figure out where to be ahead. The downside for us of being so early in the market was that it was very, very hard. It was very discouraging. There were times when I actually would sit at my desk and cry and think that we were not going to be able to pull this off, and we were going to have to stop this farce that we'd embarked upon, and that we weren't going to be successful launching this company. And we had very little money. The $90,000, I used to calculate the money we had in the bank, divide our overhead, and that was the time we had left to go before we had to go out and get serious about our lives and real jobs. But it was a really formative, I hate to sound like a parent here, but it was a very formative experience because it really forced us to focus on key areas. We had to focus on not having our expenses go out of control. We really focused on getting those first customers, and when we got an opportunity, we really worked hard to exploit it because we weren't sure when the next one was coming. So it created a lot of character, and it also, I think, allowed us to build the fundamentals of the company in a very solid fashion. I'm still tight as anything because I'm very careful about expense control, and certainly that was something that I learned in the very, very early days of Advent. So I like to say that it took us 7 years to become an overnight success. That was about how long this gestation, early growing period was, but slowly and carefully during those 7 years, we made forward progress, we added customers, and something else was happening at the same time in the PC industry during the 80s. Moore's Law was very much in force, and so every next generation of computer that came out every 12 months or 16 months, it was twice as powerful as the last one. And local area networking was invented. Maybe it was invented at Berkeley, or it was commercialized, and it was probably invented somewhere not at the same place it was commercialized. But local area networking became a standard, a de facto standard, and Microsoft was providing a lot of the business automation tools that all of a sudden turned this Tinker toy computer that was, all of a sudden it was no longer a hobby machine, but it became the de facto operating platform for most mid-size and small businesses. And we found ourselves, as a result, 7 years later, absolutely in the right place at the right time, because our software, it's enterprise software for financial institutions. Today we sell to very large institutions as well as small and mid-sized institutions, but in the early days all our customers were small and mid-sized institutions. So we had spent 7 years perfecting this product and iterating it and making it better, and all of a sudden we had the product for the platform that everyone wanted, and our mini computer vendors collapsed, and our timeshare vendors collapsed. They went away almost overnight. So again, it's this idea of being ahead of the curve. It looked like we were brilliant because we were in the right place at the right time. I think we were just we had a lot of endurance, so we were able to last at that time. So we were able to last to be there at the right place at the right time. So we took the company public in 1995. I think our revenues when we went public were about 30 million. Last year we closed the year at 170 million. So having been in this business now for 23 years, I've had the opportunity to participate in many of the phases of a life cycle of a business, from startup to public company, actually to turnaround, which I'll talk about later. So it's been a wonderful education for me, and I feel very fortunate that I've been able to participate in all of those phases of building and growing a company. And I've also seen a lot of business cycles, and I've also seen a lot of technology cycles and technology shifts. So I have a lot of strong opinions and beliefs about what it takes to build a successful company, and I'd like to share some of those ideas and thoughts with you. So as I said, when I first started out, very few people wanted to buy our product because the PC was not considered a serious business machine. But we did have a set of early adopter customers that we convinced that this was a platform that was going to be solid enough for them to run their customer portfolios on. And we took a very careful stance with these early adopter customers. We didn't just ship them the software and walk away and give them an 800 number. We stayed very, very close to them. We watched how they used it. We would oftentimes, stand over their shoulders and watched what they were doing. And when they didn't like something, we changed it and we iterated very, very quickly. And when something didn't work the way that they expected, we would spend a lot of time with them trying to understand very deeply what their requirements were. So we'd spend hours and hours with these early adopter customers. I mean, it helped that we didn't have a lot of them because we could spend that time. But we really tried as much as possible to walk in the shoes of our customer. And over many, many years of doing this, what happened was we developed products that worked perfectly for our customers. They loved them. They were ecstatic. And they really became enthusiastic proponents of our technology. It was many years ago. A story I'll tell is I was actually trying to sell some software, and I was in New York, and I could tell that the person I was talking to was kind of irritated that this little upstart company in California was having a lot of success. And he asked me, why we had been so successful. And I said, well, I think we've really been successful because we have great people and we build great products. They work very reliably, which is important for our customers. And we genuinely care about our customers being successful. And he looked really disappointed and he said, come on, cut the crap. What's the real reason? and I remember that story so well because I was so struck. I had given what was a very sincere answer. But it really struck me that a lot of people want to hear that there's a trick or there's a shortcut to building a great business. And if there is, I never found it. During the internet era, I just couldn't understand what was going on because it was never that easy for me. And I finally ended up thinking I was just stupider than everybody else because it was, building a business is hard and it doesn't happen overnight. All of the successful people that I know haven't gotten there by taking shortcuts or trying to do things quickly. It's typically great businesses are built brick by brick through hard work and a commitment to excellence. And and great businesses are really built on foundations of core values, I think a ton of common sense, and a lot of hard work. And so my lesson here is it's very important, if you want to build a business, to be intimate with your customers, understand deeply what it is that your customers need, and be relentless about pursuing innovation that really helps them and is meaningful to them. It's really easy to dream up ideas that we think are cool and neat, but if it doesn't matter to the customer, there really isn't any point in it. And that's something that is really a key value at Advent. We actually employ, it's a really disciplined process at the company where before we ever build a product, we actually put together cross-functional teams. And those cross-functional teams of engineers, marketing people, product management, we typically like to have an executive. If it's an important product area, I like to go on validation visits. And we go out and visit at least 30 prospects and in these cross-functional teams. And oftentimes what we really like to do is travel together. So if we're taking a train or we like to be in a van, so that there's a lot of communication before and after meetings so that we're sharing ideas and iterating. And what happens in this process is really amazing because you start out with an idea and 10 meetings down the path, the idea has really morphed, and 30 meetings down the path, it's come together, and at that 31st meeting, people are saying, that's exactly what I want. And so it's a really valuable exercise because we don't have a lot of misses as a result. And people complain because you have to get on airplanes, you have to travel, we got to go to Europe, and it's hard to get engineers to get on the airplane and they don't want to leave, and you know, they have to travel with the marketing people. Oh no, but you know, you get these teams together. It's very, very, very powerful, and it's something that I think is a key element to Advent's success. Mistakes are very, very, very painful, and the cost of, particularly in what we do, we build deep enterprise applications. And if we have to go back and start over on a project that has taken us a year to build because we didn't get it right, that's very, very expensive. So we have a saying in the company, first you nail it and then you scale it. And that's all about being intimate and very close to your customer. And I think in this, you know, the world of technology moves so rapidly, and change is everywhere. This principle of staying close to the customer has really helped Advent navigate through a lot of technology shifts that have killed a lot of our competitors, because I don't think we lost our focus or fell in love with a technology. By staying close to the customer, it's really helped us navigate and transition through many, many technology shifts. You know, we've been through the PC and local area networks and the internet, and we've evolved our technology with our customers, and it's because we really listen to them. Our beacon really is that customer, and it has helped us not fall in love with technologies. You know, if we like something, the internet's a perfect example. We have a data service that's actually grown into a very, very nice business where our customers reconcile data from our centralized data center, and we chose the internet as the communication platform back in I guess it was probably in 1996. It was pretty early to be using the network as the internet as a platform like that. But we looked at it and we said, this is just a really efficient, low-cost way to move this data around. And that was a perfect example of, we had a problem to solve, we looked for the best technology to solve it, and it turned out to be, you know, the right technology, and a technology that ended up being widely adopted. So this formula of staying close to the customer, understanding the technology landscape, the changing technology landscape, has really helped Advent in terms of staying on course and building a market-leading company. But around the mid-90s, things really started to change. It was, I think it was in 1995 that Netscape went public. And I kind of marked that as the day that everything changed. When I started watching how that stock moved on that day and that week, it was really clear that the world had changed forever and something was different now. And over the next 3 years, as all of you know, the venture capital investments in internet companies exploded. Hundreds of companies went public without profits, and their market valuations skyrocketed to the stratosphere. Our market capitalization actually went as high as $2 billion, which I didn't understand. I didn't think we were worth $2 billion. But you know, the rising tide, we never got to the internet style valuations, but because of the rising tide, our stock went up quite a lot. But I was baffled. I didn't understand it. It didn't make sense to me. I couldn't understand how companies could be run as public companies without earning profits. And all the things that I understood stopped mattering to the investing public. And there was a lot of pressure on us. There was a lot of pressure from Wall Street. There was a lot of pressure just as a result of reading the newspaper and the magazines every day. And also my own board of directors had, there were a few people on the board at that time who were really pressuring us to be more like an internet company. And I remember saying, what does that mean? I don't understand that. And I never really got a good answer for that. And there's a wonderful quote that I want to read from, this is a quote from a New Yorker interview with Nathan Myhrvold from that period. It was probably around 1998. And Nathan was Microsoft's chief technical guru at that time. And the way he describes this confusion and chaos and messaging. I just love it, and it's very colorful. Perspective, he says, is worth 30 IQ points. He then goes on to say there's a tumultuous compression of time scales where the hype and the hoopla, the general press and the public interest, people have been living in the future. All you hear is Bell Atlantic and TCI are going to take over the earth, and then, oops, no, they're not. And then the cable companies are king, and oops, no, the cable companies are going broke. The noise is much stronger than the signal. A year ago, people were writing Microsoft off. Netscape and the internet were going to kill us off. We were dead meat. That was premature. Some people have said more recently, oh my God, they've won, it's all over. That's premature too. Striking the balance is such a funny thing. You have this high-frequency oscillation. If you try to take a medium path through it, half the time you're a crazy Luddite. The other half the time you're a crazy optimist. I'd rather be both, goddammit, than just change with the wind and say, oops, I guess the next big thing is X. And I think that really describes very well what it feels like to be caught in this maelstrom when technologies are shifting. And if you're a CEO, a lot of these things are really threatening. And it's very easy to start going through that kind of oscillation. And it's often very difficult to stay your course and march down the path that you really believe in your heart is the right path for you to stay on. And for me, actually, it got too hard. It was in 1999, and we had this market-leading company. We had thousands of happy customers. We had double-digit growth. We had great profits. And yet, everywhere I went, people kept telling me we had to change. People kept saying, what's wrong with you? I had my seminal moment was at my son's nursery school parent evening, and we're sitting in these little tiny chairs, and my neighbor, who is the founder of an internet company, starts yapping at me. I'm trying to write down the brownie, who's supposed to bring the brownies to the next meeting. And he's telling me that if I don't start changing, my company's going to be out of business in 12 months. And I just thought, I have got to get this. This is the low point of this is absolutely the low point of my life. I've had a lot of success. I just didn't feel good about what I was doing. And I really felt like an anachronism. And I didn't feel like I understood this new world. And I think the key for me was I was not having a good time. I did not like what I was doing. And so the next lesson I want to share with you is whatever you do in your career, it has to be something that you enjoy, that you're passionate about, that you want to get up in the morning and you can't wait to start doing it. And I'll talk about that more later. So I didn't get this new world, and I wasn't having fun for the first time really in 17 years. So I retired and stepped down as CEO and spent a lot of time with my family. And I was still chairman of the board, but we put a new CEO in, and I stopped running the company. And between 1999 and 2002, Advent had a new strategy, had a new CEO, a new strategy, and went down a different path and was expanding into areas that sold really well to Wall Street, sold really well to the board, but unfortunately, they turned out to not have been sustainable or executable. And so beginning in the first quarter of 2002, after the stock market imploded, the company actually lost money for the first time in 19 years. The company had actually been profitable for its entire history. And it was the first time that we'd ever lost money. And so after the first quarter of 2002, in the second quarter of 2002, in the third quarter of 2002, things just got worse quarter over quarter. And all the curves were going in the wrong direction, and the red ink was getting redder. And we knew as a board, we knew we needed to make a change. And so I volunteered to come back to go back to the company in the middle of 2003. And reluctantly, I was having a good time. My kids are ski racers. We're skiing every day. Life was good. And It was with reluctance that I went back, because I knew there was a lot to do, and that it was, you know, I was facing 80-hour work weeks for probably the next, you know, whatever the period was. And so I went back initially as the interim CEO with the idea that I would, you know, I knew where a lot of the skeletons were buried, and that I could keep the lights on, but that we would start recruiting for another CEO. But once I got back, we made a lot of changes very quickly, because I'd been trying to counsel the former CEO about what I thought he needed to do. And we made a lot of changes very quickly, because I already knew in my head what we needed to do. So in the first 6 months, we had to lay off 150 people. We closed down offices. We shut down a lot of projects that had been initiated that I didn't believe would ever have a positive ROI. And we really focused on building a blueprint for the future of the company and for all of the products. And guess what our strategy was? Focus on our customers, build great products that solve real problems for them. You know, pretty simple stuff, back to basics. And I realized as we were going through this exercise that this is actually what I like and what I'm good at. And guess what? I started having fun again. So I actually decided to stay on as the permanent CEO, and it's now been 3 years. Company's completely turned around. We're growing again. We're making money. We're cranking out killer products. Even Wall Street likes it. Our stock's up over 100%. So, you know, going back to Nathan Myhrvold's quote, it's really important to remember that in the technology world, there's the noise and there's the signal. I think that's such a powerful image. And you have to learn to tune out the noise and focus on the signal. And at Advent, it's actually very easy for us to do that, because we know where if we ever get lost about where the signal is, it's our customer. And we go back to that customer, and we can find the signal really easily. And we can figure out, that's our beacon, we can figure out what our strategic path should be. The other important lesson in the software business is that people really make the difference. You know, it's the ones and zeros. It's all about the people that build this stuff. And when I came back to the company to do this turnaround, I was really struck, because so many of the great people that I knew very, very well, they were all there. And so in a lot of ways, my job was made very easy, because I knew that with these people there, we could make it happen. And we did make it happen very, very quickly. And at a company like Advent, people are everything, because we deal in this really deep, complex domain. And so the knowledge that is embedded in understanding the technology as well as the investment industry is really, really important. So surrounding yourself with the best people is absolutely key to the success of any business. So I talked earlier about pursuing a career that you enjoy, and I'm a big believer in work-life balance and making sure you have fun along the way, because life is way, way too short to spend your career and your life doing something that you don't like. And at Advent, we have a culture that fosters this, and we do very serious work, but we try not to take ourselves too seriously, and we try to enjoy ourselves along the way. And when I talked about the founding of the company, I didn't really talk about why I started Advent. And it wasn't because I was crazy about software, because I really wasn't. I'm not a software engineer. And I really didn't know a lot about software. I did my computer programs in the basement of Evans Hall when I was here, but because there were no personal computers. But you know, my motivation really came from the fact that at the time, I was 25, I didn't like the alternatives that I saw for myself. In 3 years out of college, I had 3 different jobs, and I really didn't like any of them. And it wasn't so much the work, it was the environments. My first job was at the Bank of America in a big building, and I was a very entry-level financial analyst, and probably as close to the bottom of the corporate ladder as you could possibly be. And my boss had hired myself and 3 other Cal grads, and he used to call us the 14s. And it took me a while to figure out why he called us the 14s. And it was because that was our job rank at the bank. And so it was just easy for him to call us the 14s than to call us by our names. And it really didn't bother us that much. We really had a good laugh about it. I mean, he went to Stanford, so we have to give him a little bit of slack. But you know, he thought it was okay to refer to us as a number. And that wasn't what really bugged me. What really worried me about my number was I had this gnawing feeling that if I did manage to spend the next 20 years clawing my way up the corporate ladder, instead of a 14, maybe I could become a 28, you know, or a 36. I mean, a doubling sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And you know, it's a hard thing to do in the investment business to double anything. And I thought about all the guys who were on the top floors with the big views, and I thought, well, they must be 70s or, you know, hundreds. And so I calculated backwards, and I figured that if I got a promotion every year, I'd still be lower than the guys on the top floors when I was 80. And you know, that just felt like it was going to take way too long, and I'm not patient enough to wait that long. And it also made me uncomfortable because it was all about somebody else deciding that I was going to be promoted, that I was going to go from a 14 to a 15 to a 16. And I didn't feel like I had a lot of control, and I didn't feel like something that I wanted to spend my life doing. So I chose to start a business really because I wanted to work in a place where I wanted to work. A place that didn't feel like a hierarchy, that felt like a meritocracy, a place where if we did great things, I could make a lot of money, even if I was only 28 years old, and it wouldn't matter, and nobody would begrudge me that because I was just, because I wasn't at the mercy of someone else. I also really hated the corporate uniform. And, you know, walking in those shoes and wearing nylons. And, you know, when I was at Cal, I rode my bicycle everywhere. And being able to wear jeans and shorts when it was a warm day and sandals to work, I was just much more comfortable. And I knew that most corporate jobs that I would apply for, I wouldn't be able to do that. So a lot of my motivation to start Advent was really about creating a great work environment for myself. And I think along the way, fortunately, we've created a great work environment for a lot of other people. So in closing, I want to just share with you the story of how we came up with the name Advent. The co-founder and I, we struggled with it actually quite a bit, and we rejected a lot of names time after time. And we finally decided on Advent because it contained and was the root of two words that we really liked: invent and adventure. And I think that when I love to think back on those two words because I think they really sum up the exercise of having built this company. And they're still very descriptive to what we do today. We invent and innovate every single day and build great products, and it's been a great adventure. Thank you.
Take some questions. Question here?
Yes?
Matt, you never mentioned if you... I was just curious if at any point in time you decided to go to business school, or did that...
No, I went to the undergraduate business school at Haas. It wasn't called Haas then. It was in Barrows Hall, but I have an undergraduate degree in business. But no, I never pursued an MBA. I just never had time. Yes?
I was hoping you could talk about some of the differences between running a company as a founder and starting a company versus how it changes when it gets bigger and you have to be a CEO, and talk about some of the differences and what that means to the job.
Well, the job has changed a lot, but fortunately, it's a little bit like growing up. It doesn't happen all at once, and you don't you don't grow out of your clothes every single day. But so I really grew up at Advent, and I very self-taught. I had some good advisors along the way, but in a lot of ways I was very self-taught, and it was about taking a look at a problem and knowing that if I didn't solve it, no one else was going to. And so that that pattern repeated itself over and over and continues to this day. And I think it's the way that I was able to learn and evolve as a CEO. And I think I've been fortunate that I've had the personal elasticity to be able to grow with the company. It's been a real education. I was talking to Richard earlier, doing this turnaround. You know, I'd never done a turnaround, but a lot of business is common sense. And I think that doing this turnaround was so fascinating because in so many ways it was just a lot of advanced common sense. And I think that's what a lot of building a business is about. In today's world, running a public company is very challenging, and I think it's actually the pendulum has swung so far that attracting people to run public companies is very difficult. I don't think I would run a public company if it wasn't my company that I had so much of my life invested in and I cared so much about, because it is a royal pain in the neck. You know, Sarbanes-Oxley and the compliance and the crap you have to deal with. That's the thing that would send me fleeing from the building is that, and it's this very strange altered reality that people have to deal with that doesn't have a whole lot to do with building great products or building a successful company. So that would be my only complaint about this evolution, is running a public company these days isn't a lot of fun. Yes?
Mike, down here.
I think that's why the private equity firms are having a heyday right now, picking up technology companies. Yes?
Yeah, so you mentioned before that in the early days of the company, you only had a few customers, so you could really concentrate and spend a lot of time. Do you still do that now that you have so many more customers? Do you find that a lot harder to do?
No, we do that, and we have a lot more people. So so we have a lot of programs that are really created to allow us to have a high touch with our customers, because it's really important. When the company strayed before, it was because we stopped talking to our customers, and the new strategy was completely built in an ivory tower, and it wasn't about finding out what the customers wanted, and it was flawed as a result. So we try very hard. Personally, I visit a ton of customers, and I may find myself, you know, in London or in New York, and I look at my calendar and I have a free slot. I'll call back to our relationship manager desk and say, I have an hour. Can you find an appointment for me? I want to go visit with a customer. And all of our executives and senior people are trained to do that. So it's very much part of the fabric of the company, is that face-to-face understanding and discussions with our customer. Because I think, you know, I saw what happened when we lost it before, and I'm determined we'll never lose it again.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Question over here.
You talked a bit about how your company made some really perfect technology decisions. I was wondering if you could go into detail on how those decisions came about.
I don't think I used the word perfect. That's a high standard. But, you know, we've made very good decisions. And in the enterprise software business, the most important decision that you need to make is you have to be on the right platform. If you're on the wrong platform, it's a little bit like being on the wrong freeway. You're never going to get to your destination. And that's where many companies fail, is when they miss those big platform shifts. And we've made them all. I have a great little cartoon that I cut out of the Harvard Business Review. And there's these two guys looking at this chart that goes up like this and then down like that. And one looks at the other, and he said, the funny thing is that's the only time I consulted the magic 8-ball. So, you know, there's art and science, and there's luck to making these good decisions. We do have an advantage because our customers, we sell mission-critical software to financial institutions. So they will not be on the bleeding edge of they may be early adopters in labs, but they won't be on the bleeding edge of moving their mission-critical applications to the latest and greatest technology. So we have an opportunity. We have a little bit of a time warp, more so than companies that are maybe selling to different kinds of markets. And I think that's a real advantage for us. And we study what's happening in more retail markets to really understand what the macro trends are, so we're sure to always get on the right freeway and be on the right platform. And then once we're on the right platform, the most important thing for our customers is features functionality, and that gets back to spending time with the customers and talking about the customers, but talking with the customers. But you know, those, I remember being in a board meeting in the early '80s, and IBM had an operating system that they'd come out with called OS/2, and we had a couple of board members who were convinced that just because it was from IBM, this was going to be, you know, the de facto operating system, and he wanted us to go out and start writing programs for OS/2 tomorrow. And you know, it was not an easy decision to kind of walk away from what Big Blue was doing. Big Blue was very powerful in those days. So these aren't easy decisions. There's a lot of art and a lot of science and consulting the magic 8-ball.
Yeah, right.
Hi, you've been. I've heard some of your practices you described that basically and that explain how you're able to do requirement analysis, understanding the requirements of the customer. I was wondering if you have any words of wisdom in not so much what to build, but in how to build. Basically, how you organize your development team. Do you have any specific secrets about how to do QA, how to do how to control the whole process of the actual software engineering and building a product?
That's a big subject. I have a secret weapon. Our CTO has been with us for 13 years, and she built the applications team at Oracle. Her name's Lily Chang, and she's not very tall, but she is very tough, and she understands the development process extraordinarily, particularly building large, complex enterprise software. So I can give you some generalizations. When you're building large-scale applications, you know, I'm a big believer in you want to factor complexity. And so you want to start out, you know, build something, see if it works, prototype it, give it to a customer, and be building incrementally. I don't like to undertake, you know, 2 or 3 year projects where I don't know until the end of year 3 if it's a success or not. And so she organizes our process that way. And then we have, you know, we have a written methodology for building software products that starts with this validation process. So the documentation begins with the validation process and moves through that whole life cycle through requirement set building, development, QA, beta, and it's a very formal methodology that we've built that everyone follows. And I think that's also one of the keys to our success, is that we don't stray from that methodology.
Good.
So Clayton Christensen argues that listening to your customer can drive you out of business due to incrementalism. So how have you dealt with disruptive technologies?
I'm not sure I understood. What was the first part of that?
Clayton Christensen,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the innovator's dilemma
Yeah.
and so forth. He claims that listening to your customer too carefully will lead to incrementalism, and sooner or later you'll be displaced by a disruptive technology. So how have you, obviously you've been in business long enough to probably see at least 1 or 2 of those waves. So how have you dealt with that?
I think there's a lot of truth to his arguments, and I think that you have to listen to your customers, but sometimes you can't take everything that your customers say literally. So there needs to be a filter, and you also want to talk to a broad set of customers and prospects to understand what the broad marketplace wants, to make sure that you build something that will be appropriate for a large marketplace. Our applications are a little different than many innovations. It's very hard for a disruptive technology to come in and undermine a large enterprise mission-critical application that takes 8 years to build. We're not as subject to that as many other technologies, so we're probably less vulnerable to disruptive innovation. But still, we have to make sure that we understand what the customers are thinking of today and what we think they're going to be thinking of 5 years from now. So it's, again, it's our not entirely science. It's factoring in what they're saying to you today and what they aren't saying to you and what you see your competitors doing and what you see happening in the broader markets. We filter all of that into our product plans. We don't just take it literally.
Just to follow up on that, do you have favorite customers that tend to be good leading indicators, or do you integrate over all the input and kind of come up with your own model?
We absolutely have favorite customers, and you have customers that are going to be early adopters and want to be on the bleeding edge, and you have customers that are going to be laggards and they're going to be the last ones to switch to a new technology. So absolutely, you see all of those different profiles. And we also, a lot of what we do is about understanding what's going to happen in the financial services market. So 10 years ago, we started building a product for hedge funds with Goldman Sachs. Well, today, hedge funds and derivative instruments and alternative investments are wildly successful, and it's a big growth area for us. And having partnered with Goldman, who is doing the innovation in those financial instruments, in those vehicles, that was a great place to be, because we basically rode all of their knowledge and innovation. And so again, we were kind of at the right place at the right time, because we started early with a customer who really understood where the industry was going, and in many ways led the industry.
According to this information, it seems that your team is composed of persons from various disciplines, including economics. But critical could be the programmers. So I would like to know how your team is composed of among the different disciplines, and how important are programmers. And then I would like to know what kind of, there could be levels of programmers. So I would like to know what would be the...
Actually, we call everyone in our development organization an engineer. And there's a fair amount of engineering that goes on in our development organization. And it might not be immediately obvious. It certainly wasn't obvious to me when I started this company, but financial accounting systems are enormously complex. And so there's a fair amount of engineering innovation that we've done to solve some very complex problems. And I'll give you an example. When we started building this product with Goldman Sachs over 10 years ago, we started with Sybase and PowerBuilder and the sort of popular tools of the time. And I had a group of engineers come in my office and say, throw up their hands and say, this isn't going to work, because it's not going to be fast enough. We're not going to be able to address the Wall Street volumes that our customers need. And they pulled out of their pocket this architecture that was an object-oriented in-memory database that they had designed and that they wanted to use as the architecture for the product. And I said, oh no, I'm in trouble now, because I knew that every customer in the marketplace wanted to buy something that was built on Sybase and PowerBuilder. That was the religion that they were buying. And we were going to solve the problem with our own religion. And so that meant that when it came time to sell that, we were going to be trying to tell people to change their religion. That's a very hard thing to do. And so it was not a decision that we took lightly, because I knew that we were going to be in this early adopter phase for a long time, because we were doing something very cutting edge, very innovative. But I got convinced when I understood the test cases, I understood what we were going to be able to do with this particular piece of software. And this was before there were any commercial object-oriented in-memory databases. Otherwise, we would have bought one. So we built our own. And we went through a very long early adopter phase. We were fortunate because Goldman got it right away. And they said, this will solve our problem. And they worked with us, and they were a very important first partner. But the lag time between Goldman and the second customer was very, very long. And then the lag time between second customer and third customer. And it was a lot like the startup of the business. It was good I'd gone through that, because I had a lot of scars from that. And so I said, we can do it. Because I knew how good it was. We could see all the benefits. And now that product is absolutely the fastest growing product at Advent. We have no competition. Nobody can touch us in terms of the speed, our ability to process the volumes of data that these financial institutions need. The biggest financial institutions in the world use this product. So there's a lot of engineering that goes on. So we have gurus, architects, very designers and individual contributors to teams that, entry-level teams that, we go the whole spectrum.
So I'm gonna take my prerogative here and ask a question that relates to that one in a way, which is, obviously you take Advent and the culture of the company very, very seriously. When you think about internationalization and what's going on, particularly when it comes to software and software development, what's Advent's philosophy there, and are you hiring developers in other parts of the world, and how do you sort of think about that?
Yes, we are. We have a development group in China, and we have had for some time, and it's a very productive group. And the way that we think about that, and it's a much lower cost group than, our engineering staff is primarily in San Francisco, so it's a lower cost to hiring in San Francisco. But our view is not that we can offshore all of our development. That's not our goal at all. Our goal is to really balance the way we grow our development organization and choose the functions that are appropriate to be in China, where we do have concerns about intellectual property. And so we're very careful about what pieces of projects go where. And it really is allowing us now to balance the way that we grow our development organization so that we can manage our costs and increase the productivity, because we're now able to work around the clock.
Okay. Last question.
Early in your presentation, you said that if you want to build a successful business, you should be looking where others aren't looking. And I guess when you started, there was almost no personal computers, so it was a very good time. Nowadays, software is ubiquitous, and probably there are very few problems that exist in the world that someone hasn't tried to solve with software, especially in the enterprise space. And I just wanted to get your perspective on the future of software, and is it becoming a commodity, as some argue with open source? And
I think there's still a lot of opportunity there. I think, even at the time for us, in hindsight, it looks like, oh, how obvious there was all this opportunity. It wasn't obvious then. And I think that we're still very early on in the automation cycle of developing software. So I think there still are opportunities. I know in our particular market, it's very nuanced and it's very niched. So we look for acquisitions all the time of people who have said, okay, here's a niche over here. It's alternative investment, risk profiling, and someone who builds something that's interesting, that can be a bolt-on acquisition for us. We're quite interested in those kinds of acquisitions, and there's lots of those opportunities. The credit derivative market is exploding, and it's a manual process to settle a lot of those transactions. So the world changes, and it creates a whole new set of problems. So I don't think we've reached saturation at all.
Sounds to me Advent would be a great place to work. So, okay, well, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much, Stephanie, for a fantastic
Pleasure.
And we'd like to present you with a special gift.
Thank
by the
you.
way, there's food outside, so you'll be able to talk to Stephanie outside. Just hang on for a second. She's got to open the gift, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I'll help you open the gift if you like, since it is very complicated. So, but it does require an explanation, you see. Okay, it does require an explanation here. So this is our special view from the top gift. There's an explanation of it for later, but there it is. Okay, Berkeley Engineering, and you'll notice in the center there's a bear. And if you look at the tip of the nose of the bear, do you see anything there?
Tip of the nose of the bear.
Yeah, in the.
No.
It's pretty hard to see. It turns out later on, when you get your glasses,
I need my glasses. Yeah.
you'll notice that there is a chip there, and that's a real working Berkeley smart dust chip embedded in there. But that one is turned off, I promise, so it won't listen in on you while you're in your office, so you can put it on the desk. So thank you again.
It was a pleasure.
Great.